Every practice has to have enough new clients and enough transactions coming in the door, and they've got to work cases up and charge appropriate fees, what I call fees in that Goldilocks zone, not too hot, not too cold, and then to create that ideal income that comes in, and then do some expense control to get your profit up to that 20%.
So that's the number. Your profit is 20% profit.
Yeah, that's our target. And it's not
Is that what you learn in vet school?
No.
Oh.
No, none of the stuff I learned in vet school.
Oh.
I learned medicine in vet school. I learned, they tried to do a little bit of business stuff. They had a lawyer that would come in from the law school and he'd talk about torts and stuff like that. We would laugh and think, yeah, let's go for lunch, right?
But it's just his PR thing that the lawyer's coming in to promote himself half the time.
It was a PR, yeah, or whatever it was. It was kind of silly.
Well, you come out of vet school as a medical doctor. You know the medicine, but you don't know the business. How'd you start getting people? How did you do it? How did you start getting people in the door? Number of veterinarians nationwide that are making what they expected to make, 5 years in on it as a veterinarian?
It's a great question. First of all, let's talk about what they expected to make. Well, I would say that 80% of us, 90% of us just expected to make a good living. We never expected to make millions because we got into veterinary medicine for the love of the medicine and working on pets. And if we can make money doing that, the joke was, and probably still is, that in private practice, the veterinarian that won the lottery, they practiced till the money ran out because they never paid any attention to profitability. It was always for the joy of the business. And that was true for myself too. I was 2 years out. I didn't like the boss I was working for because he was, focusing on money. So I got the bright idea that I should buy this practice. And, and if you look at veterinarians, I'd say 90% of us that got into practice ownership were all about just the freedom to do what we want. And that meant practicing good medicine, regardless of what the money was. And I just had a AHA sticker on the front window, the American Animal Hospital certified sticker. And I thought, that's just going to do it, right? And I lasted about 3 years.
I've been all over the country talking to lots of doctors, all types, veterinarians and dentists and orthodontists and optometrists and orthopedic surgeons. But I have found, this is just a feeling, I suppose, that veterinarians do have a much more interest in the pets, the pet owners. And it's sort of like the medicine they're providing more than the dollars they're making, which is sort of a downfall for veterinarians, I suppose. It could be, right?
We got into veterinary medicine for the love of animals, and that opens up a whole other story under working with teams of people, the dogs that stood up. That we didn't get into veterinary medicine because we liked people. Most of us got in because we maybe didn't like people that much. We liked animals, which is a really interesting, perfect storm for the weird veterinary team that works together, right?
Yeah.
But there was a story told to me from an emergency clinician that sat on a hospital board of human physicians as part of their correction quality control when a case went bad, So, and cases can go off the rails. Anybody that's been in private practice or any practice for any length of time knows that not everything goes according to plan. There can be mistakes, perceived mistakes, and so forth that need some correction of the doctor and team. So there was a physician that came in for a correction cycle with the board of directors of the hospital. The physician, there was a problem. There'd been a problem with a patient, a medical mistake, let's say. And he was kind of like, okay, guys, I got 10 minutes here. I got a golf game starting in 20 minutes. Let's flip over now to a veterinarian. If we made a mistake, like we made a incorrect incision or did something surgically or medically wise, we lose sleep for a week. We're caved in. In fact, that's some of the issues that I deal with as a consultant in this industry, working in my vertical space of private practice, independent practice owners, is talking people off the ledge. It takes down the whole practice. In fact, one of the key things to do if you have things like that is that you have to, as a team, move beyond that. And the way to do that is to get everybody together, talk it through, and then start to formulate some very specific policy that will hereafter predict and correct and prevent anything from happening, and get the team to agree on that and put it in writing. Everybody signs it in blood, blood, finger, whatever, right? And then the team can move on because these things do affect practices.
Let's pull it back to, because veterinarians that are going to see this, first year veterinarians, what is their key target?
I think the key target in the first year is to get your sea legs, get in the trenches, get your rhythm, get your routine. I just glommed onto the senior doctors, the practice owner. He was, in my case, off running Ironman marathons in Hawaii and was never around. So I kind of glommed onto the major associate doctor, and she was able to mentor me into a good habit and routine.
How soon did you break away and buy your own practice or buy that practice?
I went about 2 years, and within that 2 years, I worked at that one AHA accredited practice, being mentored by the associate doctor. But I also found a couple other mentors, and this is a really good suggestion for all brand new practice owners. If you don't have new veterinarians in graduation, I love working with graduates because I can help them. I can talk them off the ledge. And there's a couple things to do, and one of that is to find mentors you like. And so I got to know the chief pathologist at the lab who'd been in private practice for 10 or 15 years and then gone on and gotten board certified in pathology. And so I would talk to her. And then the other guy was a very well-known good practitioner. Probably it was through the lab pathologist that I heard about this guy who was really good, a guy named Dr. Richard Calland. And I looked him up, and I would talk with cases with him over the phone. And then eventually I did some relief work for him and bought his practice. And he said, "Hey, Joel, the clients really like you. I'm kind of burnt out. I'm having to drive, 2 hours. I'm out on a farm with my Morgan horses, and I'm just kind of out." So he said, "You should buy the practice." And I went, "Okay, sure. How do we do this?" Right?
What was your first major hurdles that you had to deal with?
I think the major hurdle is that there wasn't enough people coming in the door. Every practice has to have enough new clients and enough transactions coming in the door, and they've got to work cases up and charge appropriate fees, what I call fees in that Goldilocks zone, not too hot, not too cold. So they got to have the right number of clients, the right number of transactions, the proper Goldilocks fees, and then to create that ideal income that comes in, and then do some expense control to get your profit up to that 20%.
So that's the number. Your profit is 20% profit.
Yeah, that's our target. And it's not
Is that what you learn in vet school?
No.
Oh.
No, none of the stuff I learned in vet school.
Oh.
I learned medicine in vet school. I learned they tried to do a little bit of business stuff. They had a lawyer that would come in from the law school, and he'd talk about torts and stuff like that. We would laugh and think, "Yeah, let's go for lunch," right?
But it's just his PR thing that the lawyer is coming in to promote himself half the time.
It was a PR, or whatever it was. It was kind of silly.
Well, you come out of vet school as a medical doctor. You know the medicine, but you don't know the business. How did you start getting people? How did you do it? How did you start getting people in the door?
First of all, I went to a practice management seminar. I was on a Wednesday night, and they kept calling me up, and I thought, these guys are kind of pushy. They're kind of rubbing me the wrong way. But at that point in time, I'd been 3 years into practice. I'd gone through the scenario of being in the middle of surgery and having the call from the bank manager telling me to put some money in the account, and thinking to myself, I'm doing what I know what to do, put money in the account. What else should I do? I think we get, as associate doctors, we get into private practice ownership in order to have the autonomy to practice our own medicine. It's a little bit selfish in some ways, and it's a little bit, let me say, irresponsible, because when you buy practice, there's a responsibility to your team to make sure they're profitable and you're spending less than you make and all this kind of stuff that I didn't even really think of until later on. So I lasted about 3 years, went through the phone call in the middle of surgery with the bank manager to put some money in the account, and had that kind of WTF moment, hit the wall like a long distance runner, and said, I something's got to change here. The consulting company bumped into the opportunity, which was me going, WTF, something's got to change. Went to that Wednesday night meeting at a nice hotel and listened to guys talking about how to specifically run a business. And I had that kind of epiphany moment, like, hey, that's what I need. And one of the first things we did was to look at the numbers of the practice. What was the practice performing? And
so what kind of numbers were they looking at? Number of new clients?
They're looking at number of new clients, number of transactions, what was I charging, and what was the income of the practice? Just 4 basic things, what I call the basic quad. They were all down. Not only were they down below what the sustainable, viable ranges were, but they're all kind of downtrending. The practice was contracting. First of all, we did was to examine what the marketing was in the practice.
Interesting. And they made you look at that.
Yeah, they made me look at that.
What were you doing? My marketing is referrals?
Basically, it was a bunch of postcards that went out once a month and a few phone calls on vaccine reminders, and that was about it. I'm like you. I'm a marketer, not to your level of expertise, but I understand marketing. I understand that it can be done very, very professionally. And that's what I started to focus on. That got me into it.
Did you get a website at that time? Was that the thing back then?
I had one of the first websites. We're taking back a few years just as the World Wide Web was starting to happen. Before that, we bought a computer and the front receptionist knew how to type. So we started taking all the paper files and putting names and addresses in and creating a mailing list of stickers that we could put on postcards and newsletters. We started outflowing.
That's killer. I mean, that literally had a client 2 weeks ago. It was like, well, we mail out about 100,000 postcards a year. So you're spending like a $50,000 to $100,000 on postage alone.
Marketing follows communication lines. And an original communication line was the U.S. Post or Canada Post, wherever you are. But then emails came along and everything shifted towards email marketing, and then social media came along. And in the meantime, everybody stopped the analog marketing of postcards. And postcards can actually work if you've got a good postcard that they put on the fridge that's got your QR code to book an appointment, with your automatic scheduler in your practice. I like kind of hybrid models where there's kind of postcards that with QR codes now, and then Google ads and meta ads and stuff like that. I kind of like the kind of hybrid approach.
Well, it certainly matters who your target audience is too. Because if your target audience, if you happen to be in a rural community that's like a lot of older people, postcards will be brilliant.
Yeah.
Because you just want a big phone number and a big call to action. Yeah. Even if the QR code's on there, they're not going to use it.
It's a matter of getting to know your community. Like if you're in a retirement community, don't put font Arial 11 on there that nobody can read, right? Put something big. That's another thing I learned too, that, I was in a very upper end community, but there were people that owned businesses that would be driving by the practice at 7:00, heading downtown, or some of them would be in for the stock market, that's opening and so forth, early hours. If they're driving in that early and you're not open to 9:00, then they can't drop their pet off. So it's a matter of serving and really getting to know your community, what hours you need to be open. And that's why I've even recommended practice owners, like if you're wondering about that, grab a lawn chair, pad of paper and a pen and a Starbucks or whatever, and sit there at 6:00 in the morning and count cars. Are you a bedroom community that needs to open earlier to handle those driving to work people?
I love that specific, because you might come out of school or even having worked at a vet practice that is in one situation, and where your practice is, it might be so different.
So different.
And you can model it to your audience. And that's marketing 101.
It is. And that's the successes in the details. I've been working with another practice lately that works in a retirement community where people have got lots of time. They're a golf cart community. So for her to open at 6:00 would be, nobody's going to show up. So that's not needed there. So every practice is different. And that's where you need to do a lot of good survey work to kind of find who they are and what they want. So in your marketing materials, you're saying, this is who we are. And if you do it well, it's like fitting a key in a lock.
When you're working with a practice, where do you find their biggest bottlenecks that need to be released?
It could be a startup practice where the flows are low and they need to do a lot of front-end marketing. It could be a legacy practice that's been there for 30 years and the owner wants to transition out. So they're all different. And it all comes down to looking at the numbers as to what do they need to do? What do I need to do? So you can look at a practice, and I've looked at practices.
Do a lot of practice owners have numbers?
Well, their software is tracking numbers. They don't know what they'll do with them. That's been my experience as well. People arrive, at their first visit or with stacks of numbers, but they don't know what to do with it. So a lot of it is getting the practice information software system called the PIMS to go ahead and print off reports and get those into a Google Doc that you can graph certain things out. So a lot of it's knowing what data to look at. Let's say that you graph out your new clients over the last 18 months and they're going down like that. Down is bad, right? But let's say they're rising. Well, that's expanding. Expansion's good. So a lot of this is getting the data into a format that they know what to do with and start to manage by, not unlike tracking patients themselves. That's my whole approach with the Standing Ovation Practice approach, is use your data like you would use it with a patient.
I think looking at the numbers is interesting, because so many practices that I've worked with, they might keep the numbers, maybe, or their computer does.
Computer's got them.
It's in the computer. But when was the last time they looked at it? And what's it like when you look at the numbers with a doctor for the first time?
Oh, it's crazy. It's kind of like the lights turn on. They go, wow, that's so cool. I never knew that. When we show the numbers, I'm very, very compassionate about it. We'll look at the good stuff, and then we're going to look at the stuff that, needs to be changed, and importantly, what to do about it. Not just say, hey, your new clients are crashing, I'll see you later. It's like, okay, your new clients are crashing. Here's what you need to do about it.
What if they're looking at the numbers and you're like spotting that your front office person's a toxic person? Like what What do you do with that?
If the numbers are rising in the practice and you've got that person up there, then we kind of hang in there for a little bit. But if the numbers are crashing, because every time that person picks up the phone, they scare people away, then you got to step in and handle it. One of the things I'll focus on with the Standing Ovation practice is getting your practice set up properly. So when you onboard somebody, they know exactly what's expected of them. And so when you do that little closed door weekly powwow, they have agreed to the onboarding policies and procedures of being friendly, answer the phone by the second ring, whatever it is that you've got them to agree with, and that you can correct them against those policies. And you'll know right away, Sabran, if somebody doesn't like policy, they're not answering the phone and they're looking, they're texting your friends while clients are waiting. This happened the other day that there was a staff member that needed correction, and practice owner went and said, listen, we got to talk about the contract and the onboarding. And all of a sudden the person's accusing the practice owner of escalating. And when in actual fact, it's that staff member that it's their lack of adhering to the tried and true policies of the practice that started the escalation. I'm in favor of really friendly onboarding, really close weekly, closed door meetings with that person, talking about what they're doing well, what they need to correct. And you're in a spot right there, whether you've got a toxic person.
Have you had to deal with a practice where you've got a toxic person that's been there 5 years and they just don't know how to get rid of them? What the hell do you do with that? Oh my God, that's like the worst.
That's the worst. And you'll find behind that too, Sabran, is that staff member has helped out the practice owner. Like there was one staff member that was stealing the owner blind. She even had her own credit card. She'd even opened up her own bank account, was cashing checks and so forth. She'd babysat for the owner when he was first starting the practice. And when they discovered all this, he elected not to press charges. And it was to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Here's the other thing that many of us don't realize that gets us stuck with toxic people. There's a couple of things. We fail to realize that there's lots of good people out there. So we don't just let that person go. We worry that how are we going to find that other person? So we're always kind of stressed staff-wise.
The thing I think that I want to point out is that sometimes I find that these doctors out there are so working their butts off to deliver, and they got the toxic person. It's like they don't want to confront it. They don't want to deal with it. They need a guy like you to come in and back them up and walk them through the steps to get it dealt with.
It's
because
like
they're never going to deal with it.
They're never going to deal with it. We call that the dimmer switch syndrome. Have you ever heard that before? It's kind of like if you go into a room and you keep turning the lights down on the dimmer switch, you adjust, you think it's normal. And the guy like you or I walk in and go, why are the lights down here so low, right? Because we see it from the outside. And you're right. It takes somebody to come in. So there was a practice that hired a technician and didn't onboard her properly and didn't correct her properly. She kept making royal mistakes. So after 2 months of a 3-month probation period in an at-will state, they fired her. And it turns out she was pregnant, and she took him to court. And $20,000 later, and all the legal fees, they got rid of her. Like onboarding is kind of getting him into your practice culture, into there. Where do you hang your coat? What's your policy on phones? All that kind of stuff, basic stuff. And then how are you hatting them, training them for the job? And how importantly are you correcting them if you're not doing right? You got 90 days for that. You will know if you do it properly at the end of 30 days whether that person's right or not.
What are the top 1, 2, 3 issues that you find as a business consultant?
First of all, the candy bar wrapper.
What?
The idea is that the outward social veneer, the candy bar wrapper, is very different often on what the inner person is.
Yeah.
So the mistake we'll all make is we'll hire in the candy bar wrapper. We will not onboard them properly. We won't train them properly. And training, what that does is peel off that candy bar wrapper and see who they are. There was a manager that was going through the working interview, and they were about to hire. She was going to come in and manage the practice. And that was over the front end of the practice, over all the CSRs, the receptionists, and she was going to be over all that. And so on the final day, I think it was a 3-day working interview, they gave her a stack of folders and said, okay, we want you to call them and book recheck appointments. And she got this blank look in her face, and she looked it up and said, you're saying you want me to pick up these folders and call the owners? She got white in the face. She turned white as a ghost, said, I can't do that, and grabbed her purse and ran out.
And she was going to be overrunning the people that did that.
A disaster coming in the making.
Wow.
So bottom line is, don't listen to what people say. Look what they do.
Is that the top button you find?
Top button is that they'll hire anybody that fogs the mirror. You know?
What are the next biggest things you're finding in vet practices that they need help with?
They're not specific on telling people. Well, again, it depends on the practice. So that's the kind of hiring issue, right? The other one is they don't have enough people walking in the door, so they need help with their marketing. And then oftentimes the third thing is that their fees and their finances are a mess because they have no idea what they should be charging. It's one thing I was able to do through the last 20 years of working with thousands of practices is look at a lot of data and look at what practices that were very successful charging and look at the ones that weren't. And I developed a fee model called the Goldilocks Guide to Great Fees and get those.
Is that actually a title of something?
Yeah, that's my title. That's the webinar that's coming up.
Dang.
That's one of the free webinars you can do called the Goldilocks Guide to Great Fees, of which we talk about getting your fees in that Goldilocks zone. Remember Goldilocks and the three bears, not too hot, not too cold, just right. So if you get them too hot, then yeah, you'll always have some clients in, but you end up with kind of a boutique practice with not enough flow and with a little bit of a reputation that I initially had in the practice that, yeah, they're great, but they're too expensive. Yeah. And then if you're not practicing enough, then, you can't cash your own paycheck. You can't pay your suppliers. You can't give your staff raises. You can't attract your great DVMs because you can't pay enough. And so you're doing all this activity, and living this life in quiet desperation, whatever you do when you go home and worrying about the practice and dodging the creditors, right? I want to get them just right for your practice. So what I discovered...
That's so huge, because if you screw that up, you're so right. If you just follow what the guys down the street have done in the past...
They don't know what they're doing.
Who knows? They don't know. Why do they know better than you?
They don't. That's a wild thing. And they probably did like I did. I bought the practice and just follow what they're doing. And so what I developed, and I've developed a practice model based on the economic prowess is the word, the economic ability of your community. What can your clients afford to pay? So we use a marker to look and examine that's based on the zip code of the practice range you're in. We use that marker, that basic, what's called a stable datum, to construct a good fee for a practice. I've actually created some kind of fee schedule for veterinarians based on how much can your community afford. Of the thousands of practices that I've examined, 95% of them aren't charging enough. I would say 30% of them are up to 50% not enough. They can't pay their suppliers. They can't pay their credit card bills off every month.
And that they're never going to get out of it.
No.
They're going to be stressed forever.
It is our fears that hold us down. And behind every practice that's not charging enough, I will usually find strong fears around raising fees. Interestingly enough, one of the most major fears that a practice owner will have is what their staff will think about the fees. Many staff, especially on the front desk, and especially if you're not selling a proper patient care plan, that's a whole other thing, The practice owner will give the invoice to the person on the front desk, and then they look at it and then they tell the owner, and the owners get angry. I've had practices do 30, 40, 50% fee increases, and you want to know what happens? A big resounding sound of silence, of nothing. And this happened where an owner did, I think it was like a 40% fee increase, and 2 weeks later he's got an extra $20,000 in the bank. And I think he said, yeah, we did have one crazy cockatiel owner or something like that decided to go somewhere else. But it wasn't like a mass exodus or anything like that. That's been my experience, Sabran, is that when you're that low on fees, nobody says anything, despite all your fears.
It really shows me that having you or someone like you to come into a practice, you have to do it as a practice owner because you got to get your marketing right. And it might, and like you said, maybe that's going to be, well, you need to talk to someone like Sabran. Yeah. But then you got to get your HR right because you got to get new staff and new doctors coming in.
They've got to handle the flow. So marketing creates the flow. Your organization, handles the flow, and it's got to do it without a lot of friction. If your staff aren't trained, they create all kinds of mistakes and confusions, which slows everything down. And importantly, it slows the doctor down because they get cautious.
Do you find it's hard to train staff, that staff are difficult?
Depends on the staff. If you got a candy bar wrapper staff where they're a bit of a piece of what on the inside, they don't like training, they don't like policy, they're very resistant, they'll agree to doing something and then not do it. They'll be very passive aggressive. But if you get those good staff members that really truly care, they will love policy. It's kind of like if you If you in a practice keep giving a patient to a technician that forgets about the patient or makes a mistake or whatever, pretty soon the team doesn't want to work with them.
You have Standing Ovation Practice.
Yeah.
Tell me, what is a Standing Ovation Practice?
So this Standing Ovation Practice is like this beautiful friction-free practice that's profitable. It's filmed with a great team. It's like a band that plays well together. They may play a bad note every now and again, but nobody really cares, you know? And there's a sense of magic about it that when clients come in there, they have this above and beyond expected client-centered experience. And their pet gets the best care. Their pet's happy to come in there. And they come out going, yeah, okay, good. I love this practice. And importantly, is they refer their friends and family, and they give you nice 5-star Google reviews.
And I suppose it also equates at the end of the day to profitability, and you're making incredibly good livelihood and supporting your staff.
That's what this program's all about. There's 3 key pillars. They're almost like the legs of a stool. The first one is they have to have enough flow coming in. So they've got to have great PR and marketing. They got to use a company like yours, like Walker Creative, that's doing on an ongoing basis. It's just not the technician in the back that's doing Facebook or Instagram posts on her iPhone. It's a proper professional marketing that brings in enough clients and patients. The second pillar is they've got to have a great organization set up that attracts great people and trains them properly, onboards them well, offboard them if they're not working out, keep that flow going, and so that the rest of the team is not pulled down by an incompetent person that's creating a lot of friction. Pillar number 3, that's the financial flows of the practice. Is there enough money coming in? Is the expenses under control? Is there enough leftover money? So if you're a practice owner that's working in the trenches, exam room, surgery, all that kind of stuff, that's a 20% profit above what you're earning as a veterinarian. Veterinary practices can be wonderful, profitable businesses, and that's why corporations have got so interested in us.
It's been fantastic to get a chance to sit down with you and dive into the details of veterinary practices, veterinary practice ownership, the pillars that really need to be addressed to make them standing ovation quality practices.
I worked out a thing called a practice potential analysis to book an appointment with me. And we'll sit down for an hour and a half and look at your numbers and help you diagnose where you need to go with your practice.
To look at those numbers with you, is there a fee, or is this like literally a free 30-minute thing? Or right now, are you doing it for no cost? And we're looking at...
I want to know who you are. And are you a nice person? Do I like you? Do you like me? If so, let's do some business together. Let's just talk for an hour and a half. Let's look at your numbers. Let me help you have a look at your practice and see where the plus points are and those points that need to change. And then I'll tell you what it's going to need to change, and then you decide whether you want to hop on board.
Dude, that's like a $500 free consultation.
It's probably
more.
Probably north of that. You could add a 0 on the end of it, something like that.
That's crazy. My gosh. Okay, good. That's fantastic. Again, so good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you too.